Picture this. You've just walked out of an interview you were genuinely excited about. The role was perfect. Your experience matched almost every bullet point in the job description. You rehearsed your answers for 3 days. You knew your stuff. And the conversation went fine, you think. Pleasant, even. The interviewer smiled. They nodded. They said, "We'll be in touch." And you drove home feeling cautiously optimistic, maybe even good about it. Then the email comes. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." And you just sit there staring at it, genuinely confused, because you answered everything correctly. You were qualified. You were prepared. So what happened? Here's the thing. Nobody tells you when you're furiously Googling how to answer "tell me about yourself" at midnight before an interview. Words are only a small piece of what an interviewer actually receives from you. Studies on human communication suggest that roughly 55% of the impression you make comes from your nonverbal behavior. Your posture, your gestures, your facial expressions, the way you hold yourself when you walk into a room. Another 38% comes from vocal elements, your tone, your pace, your confidence in delivery, and the actual content of what you say. That accounts for about 7%. 7%. My name is Roger, and I spent 14 years as a hiring manager at 2 Fortune 500 companies, sitting across the table from candidates for roles across virtually every department you can think of: sales, operations, finance, marketing, leadership. And somewhere around year 3 or 4, I started noticing something that genuinely bothered me. I kept watching smart, capable, qualified people lose interviews they deserved to win, not because of what they said, because of what their body was saying while they said it. And the maddening part was that they had absolutely no idea it was happening. That's what this is about today. I want to walk you through the 10 body language mistakes I watched destroy otherwise strong interviews over and over again across 14 years. These aren't obscure or theoretical. They're painfully common. And the reason they're so damaging is precisely because most people don't know they're doing them. Your brain is sending signals your conscious mind hasn't approved. And the person across the table is receiving all of them. Let's fix that. Mistake 1. Walking in like you're already defeated. The interview doesn't start when you sit down. This is one of the most important things I want you to understand, and it's something most candidates never consider. The interview starts the moment you arrive. It starts in the parking lot, in the lobby, at the reception desk, in the elevator. Every single interaction you have from the moment you step onto company property is observable. And in a surprising number of cases, it's being observed. I can't tell you how many times I had a receptionist mention, casually, how a candidate had behaved while waiting, whether they were rude, dismissive, anxious, or warm. I can't tell you how many times I happened to be walking through a lobby and caught my first real glimpse of a candidate before they knew they were being seen. And what I saw in those unguarded moments, the slumped shoulders, the distracted phone scrolling, the tight jaw, the energy of someone who's already bracing for bad news, that impression didn't just disappear when they walked into the room. It came with them. The fix here is less about a specific technique and more about a mental shift. You need to turn your interview mindset on before you arrive. Sit up straight in the car, take a few slow, deliberate breaths in the parking lot. Walk into the building like someone who belongs there. Not arrogantly, just with the quiet, natural confidence of a person who is comfortable taking up space. Because here's the honest truth. The way you walk through a door tells the interviewer something about how you'd walk into a client meeting, a board presentation, a difficult conversation with a team. They're not just hiring your resume, they're hiring how you show up. Mistake 2. The handshake that undermines everything before you've said a word. You would think, in the year we're currently living in, that the handshake wouldn't still be making or breaking first impressions, and yet, I have personally watched candidates lose significant ground in the first 15 seconds of an interview because of a handshake that felt wrong in ways the interviewer couldn't even fully articulate. They just felt it. There are a few versions of the bad handshake. There's the limp one, the barely there, fingertips-only handshake that communicates a kind of apologetic uncertainty that is very hard to come back from. There's the crusher, the person who squeezes so firmly it almost hurts, which reads as dominance seeking and creates immediate discomfort. There's the pump, pump, pump handshake that goes on about 4 shakes too long. And then there's the cold, clammy, damp handshake, which, look, I understand nerves, I genuinely do, but it's worth wiping your hand discreetly before you walk in, if that's something that happens to you under pressure. The right handshake is simpler than people make it. You extend your whole hand, not just fingers, you meet their grip rather than imposing your own. You hold for about 1 to 2 seconds, you make eye contact while you do it, and you smile. That's it. It shouldn't feel like a statement, it should feel like a greeting. Practice it if you need to. It sounds almost embarrassingly basic, but it's one of those things where getting it right is invisible and getting it wrong is remembered. Mistake 3. Posture that makes you look like you'd rather be anywhere else. Here's something I observed so consistently that it almost became predictable. A candidate would walk in with reasonable energy, sit down, and then slowly, subtly, over the next few minutes, begin to collapse into the chair. Shoulders rounding forward, spine curving, body gradually folding in on itself. And they had no idea it was happening because it felt comfortable, it felt natural. The problem is that a collapsed posture sends a very specific message to the human brain receiving it. It reads as low confidence, low energy, low investment. It reads as someone who wants to take up less space. And taking up less space in the psychology of social dominance is what smaller, less confident creatures do. I'm not saying you need to sit like a soldier at attention that actually looks robotic and stiff, which creates its own problems. What you want is an engaged, relaxed uprightness. Shoulders back without being rigid, spine tall without being tense, and here's the one that most people forget: a slight forward lean from the waist. Not hovering over the table, just a subtle inclination toward the person you're speaking with. That lean is worth 1,000 words. It says, I am here, I am present, I am genuinely interested in this conversation. Check in with your posture periodically throughout the interview. Not in a distracting way, just a quick internal scan. You'll be surprised how often you've drifted. Mistake 4. Eye contact that's either absent or unsettling. There's a spectrum here, and most people fall off one end or the other. On one side, there's the candidate who can barely hold eye contact at all, who looks down when thinking, looks away when answering, who essentially conducts the interview while studying the table between them. On the other side, there's the candidate who locks eyes with such intensity that the interviewer starts to feel mildly threatened. Both of these are problems, and interestingly, both communicate the same underlying thing: discomfort. The avoidant gaze reads as nervous, untrustworthy, or disengaged. The unblinking stare reads as socially unaware or, depending on the interviewer, genuinely unsettling. What works is natural, warm, alternating eye contact. A technique I used to share with candidates who asked me for advice was this: slowly alternate your gaze between their left eye, their right eye, and very briefly, their mouth. Every few seconds, it creates the feeling of attentive, engaged human connection without the intensity of a stare. The metric I like is this: aim to be able to identify what color their eyes are by the end of the conversation. If you can do that, you've been making enough eye contact. And for panel interviews, this is especially important. Acknowledge everyone, not just the most senior person or the person who asked the question. A quick, warm glance around the room during your answer shows confidence and social awareness that a lot of candidates completely miss. Mistake 5. Nervous habits you don't know you have. This is the one that honestly makes me feel the most empathy for candidates, because it's so hard to catch in yourself. Nervous habits are by definition automatic. They happen below the level of conscious awareness. And in an interview room, they are broadcasting information about your anxiety level that your words are desperately trying to hide. The list is long. Playing with a ring or a bracelet, clicking a pen, touching your face repeatedly, your nose, your mouth, your ears, pulling at your collar, adjusting your hair every few minutes, bouncing your leg under the table, clearing your throat before every other sentence. These are all self-soothing behaviors. Your nervous system is trying to calm itself down, and it's using these small physical actions to do it. The problem is that the interviewer's brain reads self-soothing as anxiety, And anxiety, in the context of hiring, creates doubt. If this person is this nervous in an interview, how will they handle a difficult client? How will they manage under deadline pressure? The fix starts before you're in the room. Know your specific habits. Ask someone who knows you well to watch you do a practice interview and report back honestly. Then, in the actual interview, ground yourself physically, both feet flat on the floor. Hands resting naturally in your lap or on the table, still and open. When you feel the urge to touch your face or fidget, take a slow breath instead. The breath is invisible. The fidget is not. Mistake 6. Facial expressions that don't match what you're saying. Human beings are extraordinarily good at detecting incongruence. We've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years as a survival mechanism. When your face is telling a different story than your words, the person you're talking to feels it, even if they can't name exactly what feels off. What this looks like in an interview. Describing how passionate you are about an opportunity while wearing a flat, expressionless face. Saying you're confident in your abilities while the corners of your mouth are pulling down. Claiming you're excited about a challenge while your brow is furrowed with what reads as anxiety or resistance. Your face needs to be in the conversation. Nodding when you understand something. Expressing genuine interest when they describe the role. Allowing a natural smile when something is warm or light. This doesn't mean performing emotions you don't feel. That creates a different kind of incongruence that's actually worse. It means staying present enough in the conversation that your genuine reactions can show up on your face without you suppressing them. Most people in a high-pressure interview actually flatten their facial expressions as a form of control. It feels composed from the inside. It reads as cold or disconnected from the outside. Mistake 7. Mirroring done wrong or not done at all. Mirroring is one of the most powerful tools in human social connection, and the vast majority of people walking into interview rooms have never consciously used it. The basic principle is that we feel naturally comfortable and connected with people who move, speak, and carry themselves like we do. It's why you feel instantly at ease with certain people and can't quite explain it. They're matching your rhythm without either of you being aware of it. In an interview, you can use this intentionally. If the interviewer leans back in their chair and relaxes, you don't need to be rigid and forward. Settle slightly. If they speak in a measured, quiet tone, bring your energy down to match, rather than bouncing off their calm with high-octane enthusiasm. If they use certain language or terminology, reflecting it back naturally shows alignment. If they smile, there's no reason you should be stoic. The critical word here is subtly. You are not mimicking them. You're not copying every movement like a mirror image that's actually creepy and they will notice. You're tuning into their frequency. Think of it less like copying and more like dancing with someone rather than alongside them. There's a responsiveness to it, a listening quality, that creates connection at a level that bypasses the conscious mind entirely. Done well, they walk away from the conversation feeling unusually comfortable with you and not being entirely sure why. That's exactly where you want them. Mistake 8. How you handle silence and why most people handle it badly. A question lands. Maybe it's a slightly harder one or one you weren't expecting. And immediately, sometimes within half a second, you're talking. Not because you know what you want to say, but because silence felt dangerous and your nervous system decided that any words are better than no words. And so you start speaking before you've thought. Your answer wanders, you trail off, you back up and try a different direction. By the time you've landed somewhere, you've used 45 seconds to say something that deserved about 15, and you've watched the interviewer's expression shift from attentive to patient, which is a different and more concerning thing. Silence is not a failure. This is one of the most important reframes I can offer you. A brief pause before a thoughtful answer communicates something really valuable, that you think before you speak. That you don't feel so desperate for approval that you need to fill every gap immediately, that you're confident enough in what you're about to say to take a moment to actually formulate it. 2 or 3 seconds of genuine consideration before you begin answering is not awkward from the interviewer's perspective. It's composed. It's self-assured. What's actually awkward is watching someone barrel through an unformed answer because they were afraid of 2 seconds of quiet. Practice pausing. It will feel wrong. Do it anyway. Mistake 9. The virtual interview trap, same rules, higher stakes. A lot of people operate under the assumption that virtual interviews are more forgiving than in-person ones. In some narrow ways, that's true. But in terms of body language, virtual interviews are actually more demanding, not less. Here's why. In person, the interviewer is reading your whole body. The way you walked in, how you hold yourself in the chair, your hand gestures, your overall physical presence. Their brain is processing all of that simultaneously, which distributes the information load on a screen. They have approximately 27 inches of you, head, neck, maybe your shoulders and upper chest, and their brain is now allocating all of that processing power to just that small window. Every micro expression is amplified. Every slight facial tension is visible. The tendency to glance at yourself in the corner of the screen, which almost everyone does, reads as distracted and self-absorbed from the other side. Your eye contact on a video call needs to go to the camera, not the screen. I know this feels wildly unnatural, because looking at the camera means you can't see their face, and seeing their face is how you read the conversation. But when you look at the screen, you appear on their end to be looking slightly downward and away, not into their eyes. It reads as avoidance. Look at the camera when you're speaking. Look at the screen when they're speaking. Switch between those two things deliberately, and it creates the closest approximation of genuine eye contact a video call allows. And please check your background. I once had an otherwise strong candidate conduct an interview in front of a chaotic, cluttered bookshelf with what appeared to be a sports jersey hanging from it and several empty glasses on a shelf. Her answers were solid. I kept getting distracted by the background. Your virtual space is within your control in a way your physical environment in an office isn't. Control it. Mistake 10. Letting your guard down before you're actually out the door. This one I watched happen so many times it almost became painful to observe. The interview wraps up, you can feel it ending. The interviewer says something like, "Well, we really appreciate your time today." And something in your body just releases. The shoulders drop. The smile becomes something looser and less engaged. Your energy deflates as the adrenaline dissipates. And you navigate the last 2 minutes of the conversation, the goodbye, the handshake, the walk to the door on autopilot, because your brain has already decided the important part is over. It isn't. There's a principle in psychology called the peak end rule. Human beings remember experiences based disproportionately on how they felt at the most emotionally intense moment and how they felt at the end. Not the average of the whole thing. The end carries extraordinary weight in how the memory gets stored and recalled. The interviewer might have a dozen candidates to remember after a long hiring cycle. What they'll remember most clearly about each one is how they felt at the peak of the conversation and how they felt when it finished. Your last 2 minutes are as important as your first two. Maintain your posture as you stand. Deliver a proper, warm closing reference, something specific from the conversation, rather than just, "Thanks so much for your time," walk out with the same presence you walked in with. Hold it until you're fully out of sight, not until you're in the hallway, not until you're at the elevator, out of sight. Because the interview, as someone once told me very memorably, is only over when you're back in your car. Bonus mistake. The way you dress is saying something you haven't approved. I want to add one more because I'd genuinely be doing you a disservice if I left it out. And I know you've heard dress professionally for interviews approximately 800 times since you were 17. But what I'm talking about goes slightly deeper than that, because the mistake I kept seeing wasn't people showing up in jeans and a t-shirt. It was people who had clearly made an effort, but had made the wrong kind of effort and didn't realize that their clothing was generating a quiet background noise in the interviewer's brain throughout the entire conversation. Here's what I mean. Clothes that don't quite fit a jacket, slightly too big in the shoulders, trousers a little too long, read as borrowed confidence rather than owned confidence. Clothes you've never worn before and are visibly uncomfortable in create a subtle but persistent fidgeting energy, a constant low-level awareness of the fabric, the collar, the shoes that aren't quite broken in yet. And here's the one that genuinely surprised me when I started paying attention to it. Clothes that are clearly your interview outfit, the thing that comes out of the wardrobe twice a year, often look exactly like that. There's a stiffness to them, a formality that doesn't quite match the person wearing them. The fix that actually works is almost embarrassingly simple. Wear your interview outfit at least once before the interview. Not to try it on. Actually wear it for a few hours around the house or wherever. Let your body get used to it. Let the stiffness ease. Let it start to feel like yours rather than like a costume. Because the candidate who walks in comfortable in what they're wearing, who has forgotten about their clothes, because their clothes have become background rather than foreground, that candidate has one less thing pulling their attention away from the actual conversation. And in an interview, every small thing that frees up your mental bandwidth for genuine presence is worth its weight in offer letters. Here's what I want to leave you with, because I think there's a version of this kind of content that makes people feel like they need to become someone else to succeed in interviews. Like they need to construct a performance, maintain a mask for an hour, engineer every gesture and expression with mechanical precision. And if that's what you took from this, I want to gently push back on that. The 10 mistakes I've walked you through aren't about manufacturing a false version of yourself. They're about removing interference. They're about making sure the anxiety, the self-consciousness, the old nervous habits you've carried since your first ever job interview aren't drowning out the genuine, capable, interesting person underneath. Because that person, the one who prepared, who cares about this role, who has real things to offer, they deserve to actually be seen. Your body language is either confirming what your words are trying to say, or it's quietly contradicting it. And in that contradiction, interviewers don't consciously think their body language was poor. They just feel vaguely but persistently that something didn't quite add up. That they're not entirely sure they trust what they heard. That despite reasonable answers, they don't feel convinced. And they move forward with someone else. And they don't always know exactly why either. Now you know. And knowing it changes things. Before your next interview, practice the handshake with someone. Record yourself answering a question on video and watch it back, not to nitpick, but just to see what you actually look like versus what you imagine you look like. Those two things are often surprisingly different. Sit in a chair and practice the posture until it feels natural rather than forced. Walk into a room and notice what you do with your hands, your face, your eyes when you're being watched. These are learnable things. Every single one of them. They're not gifts some people are born with and others aren't. They're skills. And the difference between the person who walks out of an interview room leaving a powerful impression and the person who walks out confused about what went wrong is honestly a handful of very specific, very fixable habits. You already have the words. Now make sure the rest of you is telling the same story.